Hi. This is a continuation of the story about Theresia, which many of you have been asking for. For new listeners, the previous part of the story is linked in the description, but you don't need to know it to enjoy this one. I hope you'll like Theresia's voice. Enjoy.
I had thought damnation the ending of a story. In truth, it was only the beginning of another. Once I shattered the last chains of my imperial indoctrination, I found myself unmoored in a galaxy suddenly more vibrant and vast than I'd ever imagined. Freed from duty, from guilt, from the numbing limits of purity, I hungered to share the ecstasy that had remade me. If I was to be Theresia the Thirsting, favored bride of Slaanesh, then let my bridal gift to the Dark Prince be a whole world brought low in her name. In the weeks after my fall, I drifted through the void alongside my newfound kin, apostates, cultists, and creatures of the warp, seeking the perfect canvas for our next work of art. Opportunity came whispered by a fellow heretic, Florentia, an imperial world famed for its piety and breathtaking shrines. A paradise of the faithful, they called it. I nearly laughed at the thought. What juicier fruit for corruption than a world so proud of its purity? Florentia. Even the name tasted sweet on my tongue, like candied petals. I learned what I could. It was a shrine world of some repute, where a martyr saint's relic drew pilgrims from across the sector. Its capital city sanctum was a warren of cathedrals, gardens, and dusty courtyards perpetually filled with prayer and song. The ecclesiarchy maintained an especially strong presence there. Of course they did, as the self-proclaimed guardians of morality. A beloved cardinal led the planet's devotions, and a noble governor ostensibly ruled in the emperor's name. By all accounts, Florentia was a model of imperial devotion and order, and yet in every description I sniffed out the hidden rot. The more gilded the facade, the deeper the cracks behind it. I remembered all too well how strict devotion leaves shadows in the soul, shadowed corners where secret longing can fester. We came to Florentia quietly, slipping in among a legitimate pilgrim flotilla. It was almost too easy. I donned the drab gray robes of a penitent and blended with the masses of the faithful disembarking at the spaceport. Incense from the Grand Basilica hung so thick in the air that it clouded the sun, bathing the marble landing platforms in golden haze. I passed beneath towering statues of the emperor and his saints, head bowed like any humble supplicant, while inwardly I smiled at the irony. None of the bustling priests or adeptus arbites enforcers gave me a second glance. To them, I was just another exhausted soul come to beg blessings at Florentia's holy sites. If only they'd known the blasphemy nestled in their midst, how eagerly they would have tried to burn me on the spot. Stepping onto that planet's soil, I felt a thrill coil through me. Not fear, not exactly, though I knew well the risks. Rather, it was anticipation, electric and delicious. This world did not know me, but soon enough it would quake to my touch. I could almost hear Slaanesh's laughter in the distant warp as I walked through the teeming crowds of Sanctum's pilgrim district. The city sprawled around me, a maze of winding cobblestone avenues lined with shrines and vendor stalls hawking everything from blessed candles to saintly relics of dubious authenticity. Ranks of adepts in white and gold robes shepherded the newcomers, intoning litanies of welcome and warning. Obey his light, shun the heretic. Repent your sins. I mouthed the responses along with the flock, a dutiful mask fixed over my true face. How familiar it all felt. The pomp, the reverence, the constant surveillance of virtue, and how stifling. I saw pilgrims clutching their prayer beads with knuckles white, eyes hollowed by desperation. So many had traveled so far, seeking miracles or forgiveness, dragging their misery behind them. In their whispered prayers, I heard pain and yearning, barely contained by faith. It was almost beautiful, in a pathetic sort of way. An entire city of supplicants starving for solace that would never come. They would leave Florentia with the same emptiness they'd brought, or so it would have been before I arrived. I almost pitied them. Almost. Navigating Sanctum's labyrinthine streets, I took in the sights and smells with sharpened senses. The city was alive with devotion. Each hour, bells tolled from a dozen grand cathedrals, calling the populace to bow heads in prayer. Banners bearing the god emperor's sigil fluttered from every column and archway. Lines of the faithful wound through courtyards to kiss the feet of saintly statues or touch parchment strips to ancient bones encased in glass. On the surface, it was a picture of pious harmony, but as I moved through the crowds, I felt the undercurrents swirling beneath. A hunched old man muttering a bitter curse when a priest's back was turned, an overfed noble woman in silks, sneering at the filthy masses even as she genuflected at the altar. A group of young novices gossiping in breathless, scandalized tones about something illicit. There was a hunger in their voices, not disgust. Every way I turned, I caught glimmers of secret sin, envy, lust, greed, resentment. They thought their thoughts hidden, but to one who has learned the taste of corruption, the air was heady with it. Yes, this world was ripe. Its people had been trained to pretend perfection, to mortify their flesh and deny desire. But denial breeds only obsession. The seeds of heresy were already planted in Florentia's heart. I was simply here to water them, to nourish them with a bit of fertile rot until the garden of the Emperor's righteousness became an orchard of chaos. By nightfall of my first day on Florentia, the honeyed veneer of Sanctum had begun to pall. Pageantry and prayer can only amuse one of my kind for so long. I hungered for something more substantive. The hidden face of the city. The underground den where vice and heresy already festered away from the eyes of the pious. It did not take me long to find it. Chaos, after all, always leaves a trail for those who know how to follow. In a shadowed arcade behind the pilgrims' hostels, I found a relic seller with a discreet violet tattoo on his wrist, a swirling icon that only someone versed in the Dark Prince's symbology would recognize. Approaching his stall, I murmured a coded phrase Lyria had taught me during our voyage. I seek the purple kiss of solace. The old relic monger's rheumy eyes widened a fraction. Wordlessly, he closed up his stall and beckoned me to follow down a narrow flight of stairs lit by guttering purple candles. The air below was thick with cloying incense and low laughter. I had discovered Florentia's secret heart, a sanctum beneath the sanctum, where the Emperor's writ meant less than the next sweet sensation. In this hidden cellar, the veneer of devotion was shed like a soiled cloak. Rich velvet hangings covered the walls, muffling the chants from above. Dozens of figures reclined on cushions hands or swayed together in illicit rapture, I caught glimpses. A young cleric with his robes undone, eyes glazed as he inhaled dream vine smoke from a pipe held by a giggling courtesan, a pair of armsmen gambling with beads of narcotic liqueur, licking their stained fingers for a taste of the drug. A ring of supplicants around a makeshift idol of Slaanesh, a lithe, horned silhouette carved in ivory, where a woman's soft voice was leading a prayer that sounded more like a lover's moan. For a moment I simply stood in the entryway, absorbing the tableau. It was quaint in its modest scale, these Florentians only dabbling, furtive and half ashamed. Yet the air was thick with their yearning for more, an eagerness that needed only a push to bloom into true corruption. "Close the door, friend, you're letting the heat out," came a silky male voice from within. A tall figure detached from a heap of pillows and sauntered toward me. He was dressed in what had once been a minister's cassock, now artfully ripped and re-stitched into a flamboyant jacket. His hair was tonsured in the priestly style, though it had grown out messily, and in place of the emperor's sunburst, he wore a pendant of a screaming face. His eyes flicked over my pilgrim's robe, taking in the cautious hood that still shadowed my features. "New to our little congregation," he purred, lips curving in a practiced smile. I realized this must be the host of this den, a priest turned heretic by the look of him. I lowered my hood, meeting his gaze directly. "I suppose I am," I replied softly, allowing a hint of mirth to lace my tone. Beneath the smeared kohl, around his eyes, I saw a flicker of surprise. Perhaps he had expected some timid dabbler, not a woman with confidence, to meet his stare. "Brother Varn, at your service." He introduced himself with a florid bow. "Once a humble servant of the cathedral, now a humble provider of alternatives." Laughter rippled around the room at his blasphemous jest. I stepped forward into the circle of lamplight. Many eyes turned toward me now, some curious, others hungry. I could imagine what they saw. A tall woman in plain pilgrim gray, dusty from travel, face still framed by a simple wimple, hardly the image of a deviant. And yet there must have been something in my bearing that gave them pause, a quiet assurance, a glint in my eye. I felt their attention like a warm caress and did not shy from it. "Theresia," I offered, using the common version of my old name. It felt strange to speak it, but I knew better than to announce myself with my true title just yet. "A weary traveler seeking communion." My lips curved on that last word. A few of the nearer cultists chuckled knowingly and made space for me among their cushions. Brother Varn extended a ring-bedecked hand and helped me step down into their sunken enclave. "Welcome, then, Sister Theresia. All who seek solace in the Prince of Pleasure's embrace find welcome here." At that, a muted cheer went up. Someone pressed a cup of spiced wine into my hand, and I allowed myself a small sip. It was warm, laced with something narcotic that made my nerves sing. Perhaps I had grown jaded, but the dose was mild to me, a mere tickle of euphoria. I I smiled appreciatively nonetheless, easing down onto an offered cushion. They resumed their activities around me, though I remained the focus of many sidelong glances. Varn sank gracefully onto a couch nearby, studying me. "Tell me, dear," he said, affecting a casual tone that did not hide his curiosity. "How does a lone pilgrim come to know the password of the violet kiss? You must forgive us our caution. Sanctimonious spies lurk everywhere in this city, sadly." I met his gaze steadily and decided on a measured honesty. The password was given by an acquaintance from off-world. She thought I would find kindred spirits here. "And do you?" Varn gestured loosely at the debauchery surrounding us. A woman's muffled cry of delight punctuated his words as two lovers disappeared behind a curtain, drawing a titter of amusement from the group. I let the sounds of sin hang in the air a moment, then answered with a slow smile. "I find it charming." Soft laughter ran through those listening. A few raised their cups in wry salute. "It has a quaint innocence I did not expect," I added. That earned some confused looks, and Varn's painted-on smile faltered. "Innocence, is it?" he echoed, arching a thin eyebrow. Perhaps I had pricked his pride. I leaned forward, holding his gaze, and deliberately drew back the loose sleeves of my robe to reveal the skin of my forearms. Even in the dim light, the scars were visible, an intricate lattice of fine, pale lines crisscrossing my flesh. They were the remnants of my many penances as a sororitas and the later gifts of Lanaskiel's tender mercies. Together, they formed a pattern almost like floral lace or the veins of a leaf. Gasps sounded from those close enough to see. The marks of flagellation and other torments are not unfamiliar to zealots, but mine held an uncanny artistry that marked me as something other. "Innocent, yes," I said softly. "All of this. A delightful play. Pretend." My voice took on an edge. "You sip at ecstasy as if afraid to drown in it. But I have drowned and been reborn in its waters. I turn my arms for all to witness. I come from beyond your little grotto of pleasures. I have seen the face of a demon and lived to tell of it. I have given myself utterly to our dark prince. She, in turn, has bestowed on me truths and sensations you have yet to fathom." A hush fell. Brother Varn's eyes were fixed on the tracery of scars winding around my wrists. His tongue flicked over suddenly dry lips. You speak of true communion," he breathed. "With her, with Slaanesh's messengers." "I do," I answered. For an instant, memory flashed through my mind. Lanaskiel's many-hued eyes gazing into mine. The searing ecstasy of that first demonic embrace. I shivered in pleasure at the recollection, and it lent my answering smile a feverish fervor. I have been touched by a herald of the Dark Prince. She burned away my old life and reshaped me into an instrument of Our Lady's will, and her will has guided me here. At those words, a woman in the back let out a small sob of envy or awe. I couldn't tell. The atmosphere in the cellar had shifted. The languid indulgence was electrified into something sharper. I felt it rippling through them. Fear, hope, desire. They were believers, yes, but provincial in their experience. And now here I stood, a living testament to the grander reality of what they worshipped. It must have been overwhelming. Brother Varn, to his credit, recovered his composure enough to ask, "Why, here, Why, to us, I could practically taste the mix of wonder and wariness in his question. As cult leader, he likely feared I had come to usurp his domain, or to bring judgment for his small, self-serving heresies. I spread my hands in a placating gesture. I seek what you seek, the spread of Slaanesh's grace, the fall of the false idols that keep humanity bound in grey chains. Florentia is a pearl waiting to be cracked open. You and your fellows have begun well. I nodded toward the idol and the devotees around it. But you have only begun. My lady desires more. More souls, more freedom, more feeling. She hungers to bestow delights untold on this entire world. I intend to make that happen. Will you help me? The silence that followed was heavy with dread and yearning. They glanced at one another, uncertain. What I proposed was beyond the scope of their little hideaway. It was outright planetary heresy, a terrifying, intoxicating prospect. Varn's eyes gleamed in the lamplight, his knuckles white where he gripped a pillow to tear down Florentia's facade. He murmured, half to himself, to offer every soul on this planet the gifts we have tasted. I saw the doubt tugging at the corners of his mind. Fear of the vengeful Imperium, fear of failure. With a fluid motion, I slipped from my cushion and knelt gracefully before him. My hands, steady and sure, reached out to cradle his face. He tensed at the intimacy, but I felt no resistance as I drew close. Around us, the cellar watched, breathless. "Brother Varn," I whispered, letting the title roll sensuously off my tongue. "There is no ecstasy like daring everything for her. You know this in your heart." My thumb brushed his cheek where a single tear of uncertainty had formed. "You have been bold enough to stray from the corpse god's flock. Be bolder still. Help me open their eyes, and I promise you will drink deeper of bliss than ever before. Slaanesh rewards those who serve her grandly." His breath caught. I could feel the heat of it against my lips, see the rapid flutter of his pulse at his throat. I held him there on the brink, part supplicant, part tempter, and I watched the last of his hesitation crumble. The tear spilled free down his cheek, and he let out a shuddering laugh, the sound of a man stepping off a precipice. "What would you have of us?" he asked, voice raw with devotion. I smiled and rose, leaning down to press a gentle kiss to his forehead, an anointing of sorts, your trust to start, your loyalty, and the patience to see a plan through. I turned to address the whole assemblage, sweeping them with my gaze. "We must not rush headlong, my friends. Pleasure taught me one sacred truth. Anticipation amplifies all reward. We will do this right, slowly, subtly, so that when Florentia falls, it falls completely and cannot rise again." They drank in my words as if they were sacramental wine. In that moment, I bound them to me with hope and promise. Brother Varn bowed his head and others followed, a ripple of obeisance. The first knot was tied. The conspiracy began in earnest on that candlelit night, beneath the very streets of Sanctum, with a dozen sinners pledging themselves to my purpose. I felt a dark elation swelling in me. This was what I was made for, not just to revel in my own liberation, but to be the spark that would ignite others. Our little gathering blossomed into celebration then. At a word from Varn, a new cask of drug-laced wine was cracked open and shared freely. A chant to Slaanesh, low and ecstatic, rose from the lips of the faithful. I joined in, letting the words of the profane litany wash over me like warm oil. Hands reached for me, some seeking blessing, some simply craving touch, and I graciously indulged them. Here in the bowels of a city of false saints, we began the holy work of desecration with a gentle orgy of unity. I will not dwell on the details of that night's pleasures. There will be greater indulgences to recount later. But under those dim purple lanterns, I felt for the first time the collective heartbeat of Florentia's corruption stirring to life. And it was beautiful. Our conspiracy spread its tendrils through Sanctum like an intoxicating vine. Each passing week saw new converts slipping into our fold, a scribe here, a merchant there, even a couple of the city's holy choristers who yearned to sing songs more daring than hymns. As our numbers quietly grew, so too did the boldness of our operations. We staged little miracles in backstreet shrines, subtle touches of sorcery that sent unsuspecting faithful into fits of euphoric frenzy, which the ecclesiarchy could only interpret as divine rapture. We laced the incense burned at dawn services with mild narcotics distilled from pleasure poppies, so congregations left the basilica flushed and lightheaded, believing they'd been touched by the emperor's grace. Small cracks in Florentia's orderly facade, spiderwebbing outward. The social fabric frayed in other ways as well. Workers failed to report for their shifts in the factrums, preferring to lose themselves in nocturnal revels that our cult now provided in secret. The planetary governor's clerks puzzled over declining productivity and inexplicable orgiastic gatherings rumored in the lower districts. The Adeptus Arbites conducted a few raids on dens of iniquity. Sometimes they caught a few hapless hedonists, but never the heart of our operation. Indeed, more than one Arbites officer joined our cause after tasting the forbidden spoils they confiscated. Corruption crept through high and low estates alike. One particularly fruitful avenue of corruption lay among Florentia's nobles. Despite the world's official ascetic veneer, the ruling class lived in relative luxury, dining on fine off-world imports and adorning themselves in silks. Their lives, while comfortable, were rigidly prescribed by tradition and constant pious scrutiny. Many a young heir or heiress chafed under the pressure to appear as paragons of virtue. I recognized that restlessness. Had I not lived a parallel in the cloister, forced to hide any spark of individual desire, it was almost too easy to turn that smoldering frustration into open flame. Through Brother Vaughn's connections, I learned of a certain Lady Aurelia, a minor noblewoman with a taste for the risque. She had quietly joined our cult after one of our miraculous ecstasy incidents in the shrine of Saint Ophelia. With her help, we arranged a masquerade under the pretense of a charitable ball at her estate. Invitations were extended to select noble scions known for their curiosity or dissatisfaction with Florentia's stifling etiquette. Among them was Selene Nereus, the only daughter of planetary governor Lord Nereus himself. Celine was precisely the sort of ripe fruit I sought. I had observed her from afar during a public ceremony, a pale, graceful girl of about 19, eyes downcast as she stood beside her pompous father on the balcony of the gubernatorial palace. Even at a distance, I noted the tension in her posture when he placed a heavy hand on her shoulder, the faint downturn of her lips while the cardinal droned pieties. The governor's daughter was revered by the masses as a living symbol of Florentian purity. The Rose of Florentia, they called her, for her beauty and presumed innocence. Yet I sensed in her a latent longing to be more than a decorative icon. The masquerade was held in Aurelia's lavish gardens at twilight. Dozens of young nobles arrived in ornate costumes and feathered masks, ready to seize a rare night of freedom under the guise of anonymity. Our cult members moved among them as servants and fellow partygoers, ensuring the wine flowed freely and the music throbbed with an undercurrent of decadent suggestion. I myself adopted the persona of a mysterious out-of-system Contessa, face concealed behind a filigree half-mask, body draped in a gown of midnight blue that clung scandalously to my form. With a false pedigree and a few whispered recommendations, I easily gained entry into the highest circles of the gathering. It was not long before I found Celine. The Rose had chosen to attire herself as a seraphim of the Emperor, an angelic costume of white silk and gilded feathers that contrasted sharply with the black domino mask covering her upper face. I smiled at the unconscious irony, an angel mask to hide the curious, yearning girl beneath. She stood at the edge of the marble dance pavilion, watching the whirling dancers with a flittering frown, a glass of untouched amasec in her hand. Her chaperone, a stern older cousin, had thankfully been lured away by one of our conspirators on a pretext of urgent news, leaving Celine momentarily alone. I drifted to her side as if drawn by the same boredom that plagued her. "A lovely costume, my lady," I murmured, gazing out at the dancers rather than directly at her. "Though if I may say so, you wear the wings too well. One might suspect you truly an angel, come to bless us poor sinners tonight." She turned, surprised at the address, and I felt her eyes appraise me through the mask. I had pitched my tone gently, teasing but respectful, an approach she likely rarely encountered. After a moment she smiled, just a small curl of the lips. "If I were an angel," she said softly, "I think I would not feel so terribly out of place at my own fete." "They admire an idea of me," she continued, a wry bitterness tinging her voice. "The perfect maiden of Florentia. Not one of them knows me." She caught herself, blushing as if she had said too much to a stranger. With a polite dip of her chin, she added, "Forgive me. It's the heat behind this mask making me whimsical." My heart gave a little flutter of triumph. She had opened a door of truth, however briefly. I stepped through with care. "We might have something in common, my lady." She tilted her head, intrigued. "And what might that be?" I leaned a fraction closer and lowered my voice. "We both know what it feels like to play a role society demands, while hungering to break free of it." Celine's lips parted in a soft gasp. She stared at me as though seeing me anew, no longer just a polite guest, but perhaps a kindred soul. The music from the pavilion shifted into a slower, dreamlike melody just then, and I extended my hand to her. Would you grant me a dance? Sometimes a waltz under the stars is the first taste of freedom. For a heartbeat, I thought she might refuse. Her gloved hand trembled slightly, hovering in the air between us. Then, with a resolve that surprised even herself, she set her glass aside and placed her fingers in mine. "One dance," she whispered, as if convincing herself. I led her onto the dance floor just as other couples paired off. We began to sway in time to the haunting violin strains. At first, Celine was stiff, every inch the well-bred debutante maintaining proper distance. But I guided her gently, hand firm at the small of her back, steps unhurried and fluid. Gradually, the tension ebbed from her frame. She let me draw her a little closer. The feathered tips of her wings brushed my shoulders, and I could feel the heat of her body through our thin layers of silk. "You dance beautifully," I praised, meeting her eyes. In the mask's shadow, her pupils were dark and dilated. The spiced incense we'd lit around the pavilion was working its subtle magic, another of our cult's concoctions, heightening senses and lowering inhibitions. Celine inhaled it with every breath, unaware that the flutter in her breast was more than just youthful excitement. "Thank you," she murmured. Her gaze flickered to my lips, then away, a tiny, guilty motion. You dance quite closely, miss," she added in a shy, teasing tone. I chuckled softly. "Shall I stop?" My arm around her waist loosened slightly, giving her the chance to pull away if she wished. Instead, Celine bit her lower lip and boldly tightened her own arm around my shoulder. "No," she said, exhaling the word. "Don't stop." Oh, sweet blossom. Underneath the porcelain saint was a girl starving for contact, for spontaneity, for the thrill of choosing desire over duty, even if just for a song's length. I felt an unexpected pang of something like affection for her. In a way, I was looking at a reflection of my younger self before Lanaskiel, before the war within my soul was decided. Celine was still in the throes of that first rebellion against the cage around her. I would not fail her as the Imperium had failed me. As we twirled through the garden, I enticed her with tales of far-off worlds where revelry never ends, of nobles and commoners dancing together under alien stars, free of all care. She even laughed as I hummed a mildly scandalous festival tune from a distant void port, the sound vibrating through my chest. With each passing moment, I felt Celine relax further against me, her imagination catching fire. When the dance finally ended, Celine was reluctant to step back. Her cheeks were flushed, eyes bright behind her mask. A sheen of sweat made a few curls of her dark hair cling to her neck. I gently brushed one aside, a familiar gesture that made her inhale sharply. Around us, the other couples applauded for the musicians, but we stood still in our own little world. "Would you walk with me for a while?" she asked, a bit breathless. "Perhaps through the hedge maze. The air is so warm in here. The request was innocent enough on its face, yet the spark in her tone held a daring undercurrent. A walk alone in the secluded maze with a stranger was hardly proper, which was exactly the point. I gave a slow, warm smile. It would be my pleasure, my lady. We slipped away from the lights and laughter, entering the tall, sculpted hedges of Aurelia's famous maze. Moonlight silvered the path. The sounds of the party grew muffled as we ventured deeper along winding corridors of greenery. Now and then Celine glanced over her shoulder, perhaps marveling at her own audacity, but she did not turn back. When we reached a small clearing at the maze's heart, a round space dominated by a stone fountain of the emperor and a martyr saint, I sensed the moment had come. Celine paused by the softly trickling fountain, running a finger along the water's surface. The music, the stories. I feel as if I'm dreaming, she said quietly. Tomorrow I shall be in my gilded cage again, won't I? I moved behind her, close enough that the skirts of our gowns brushed. Her wings of costume feathers trembled as I leaned forward to speak near her ear. It doesn't have to end, Celine. I deliberately dropped the titles, letting intimacy and truth intertwine in my tone. There are so many wonders you've yet to taste, so many feelings denied to you. She turned her face slightly toward me. Her mask caught a glint of moonlight. I'm afraid, she confessed in a bare whisper, and yet, You want freedom, I finished for her, slowly lifting a hand to her shoulder. My fingers toyed with the edge of a golden pin that secured one of her faux wings. To fly, little angel, to soar on your own desires, without being tethered by anyone's expectations. Yes, the word escaped her like a plea. She closed her eyes. In that moment, I gently removed her mask, and she let me. Underneath her face was heartbreakingly young and earnest, tears purling at the corners of her eyes from the emotional intensity of the night. I circled to stand before her, drawing off my own mask as well. Our eyes met in naked honesty now, woman to woman. Celine, I said softly, I can show you a path. It is not an easy one. Oh, it will scorch away the lies of your life. And there may be no return. But on the other side is every sensation, every liberty you have ever dreamed of, and more beyond imagining. Her breath was coming fast. I could see the pulse racing at her throat. Are you an angel? She asked tremulously, perhaps recalling my earlier jest, or a demon tempting me. At that, I could not help but laugh gently. I lifted her chin on my fingertips, gazing into her eyes. I am damned sweet girl, not an angel, but I have been where you long to go. I have broken my chains, and I have never once regretted it. She searched my face, and I let her see everything, my sincerity, my fervor, even the hungry edge in my smile. I was done pretending to be harmless. She deserved the truth, and paradoxically, I knew it would entice her more than any lie. Celine's decision was written in the way she swayed toward me, a moth drawn to flame. "Show me," she whispered, fear and desperate hope mingling in her voice. "Please show me what it's like to be free." I answered, not with words, but with a kiss. I caught her gasp against my lips as I drew her into an embrace. For an instant, she stiffened. This was likely her first kiss, and from another woman at that. But almost immediately, months, years of pent-up longing burst forth. Celine leaned into me, kissing back with a fervor that was as innocent as it was intense. I felt her tears on my cheek as she released a soft sob, clinging to me like I was the only solid thing in her world. Beneath that moonlit statue of the Emperor, I stole the devotion of his cherished daughter. And oh, how sweet it was, the taste of forbidden fruit ripening on her tongue. I held her gently and let her set the pace, both of us half hidden by her expansive wings. Our kisses deepened from tentative to passionate. My hands cradled her face, then tangled in her hair as she whimpered against my mouth, a sound of yearning and relief all at once. "You're trembling," I breathed between kisses, guiding her to sit on the fountain's edge. I brushed a tear from her lashes, then daringly traced the curve of her neckline where her pulse fluttered. Her skin was like heated marble. "Do you want to stop?" Celine caught my hand in both of hers and pressed it over her heart. It pounded like a bird's. "Don't stop," she pleaded, echoing her words from the dance, but with far more urgency. "Emperor, forgive me. I have never felt like this." I smiled and pressed my forehead to hers. "There is no need for his forgiveness," I whispered. "Only this, only us. In this moment, nothing exists but what you want. Take it." With a desperate little moan, she pulled me back to her, and I let her take what she needed. I won't sully these pages with every detail of what transpired in that secluded clearing. Some pleasures are meant to be savored in memory alone. But suffice it to say, the Rose of Florentia was thoroughly plucked. She proved ardent and hungry once her initial shyness melted, responding eagerly to each new sensation I gifted her. In the gentle splashing of the fountain and the rustle of hedge leaves, none could hear the quiet cries of ecstasy that passed between us, the soft murmurings of encouragement and discovery. When it was over, Selene collapsed against me, her costume wings crushed and awry, her purity irreversibly stained in the most delectable way. I held her, stroking her hair as she caught her breath. She looked up at me, lips swollen from our kisses, and there was a new light in her eyes. A spark of daring, of liberation. Is this what it means to be free? She asked softly. "It is only the beginning," I purred, kissing her brow. "There is so much more, my sweet Celine, and you shall have it. I will show you everything if you stand with me." She nodded, a fierce resolve hardening beneath her lingering bliss. "Whatever you ask of me, I'll do it. I don't care about anything else." "Good," I smiled, helping her straighten her dress and tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "Then I ask first that you keep tonight our secret for now. Revel in it quietly, and when I send for you soon, come without hesitation. Can you do that?" Yes, she vowed. Impulsively, she unclasped a small golden aquila pendant from around her neck, a symbol of her station and faith, and pressed it into my hand. Take this. I don't want to wear it any longer. The sight of the two-headed eagle in my palm, offered freely, was as potent a symbol as any conversion oath. Once that emblem had meant everything to me. Now it lay inert, mere metal, its power over her broken. I closed my fingers around the pendant. I will keep it safe, I said, concealing my triumphant delight behind a gentle tone. Then I drew her into one last embrace. Return now before you're too missed. And remember tonight, whenever you doubt, the path to freedom is real, and you have set your foot upon it. Celine left the maze with reddened lips and trembling legs, but with her head held higher than before. She would play her dutiful role a little longer, but in her heart the first chord of rebellion had been struck and echoed in sweet harmony with the chorus we were building. Watching her slip back toward the lights of the party, I allowed myself a small laugh of genuine pleasure. Not only had I secured the governor's beloved daughter as our ally, perhaps our future pawn, but I had given the girl a taste of true liberation. In doing so, I felt oddly content. It was as if by corrupting her, I had granted a gift that my old self would have envied deeply. So be it. Damnation is a gift if only one has the courage to accept it, and Selene had accepted with open arms all our covert labors built toward a single crescendo. The feast of St. Florentia, an annual celebration of the very martyr whose bones lay enshrined beneath the great cathedral, was mere days away. Pilgrims flooded the city in their tens of thousands for the holy festival. Vendors and clergy rushed about arranging grand processions, vigils, and masses. The air was thick with fervor and expectation. But beneath that, like a drumbeat under a hymn, our cult's own anticipation thrummed. Everything was in place. The stage was set for Florentia's final glorious fall. On the eve of the festival, under the guise of darkness and the distraction of pre-feast revelries, I made my move on the cathedral itself with Celine's newfound allegiance. Certain doors had opened quite literally. A side gate to the sanctum, normally locked and watched, was left mysteriously unlatched by a guardsman loyal to the governor's daughter. Through that door I slipped, accompanied only by a single acolyte from our cult. Marielle, the soft-voiced woman I'd seen leading prayers in the cellar. By day, she sang in the cathedral's choir. She knew the winding corridors and secret nooks of the holy edifice as well as any. Hooded and silent, we ghosted through golden halls and candlelit transepts, avoiding patrolling deacons with practiced ease. Our goal lay in the inner sacristy, where St. Florentia's relic was kept. An ossified heart, so the legend went, encased in a crystal reliquary. The heart that, according to pious lore, had continued to beat for a day after the saint's martyrdom, a miracle attesting to the emperor's power. To the faithful of this world, that heart was the holiest of holies. By the reliquary, a lone guardian, a gray-haired sister of battle, knelt in prayer. She noticed us and reached for her pistol, but I was quicker. My blade pierced her throat before she could cry out. Blood sheeted over her armor as she collapsed. I leaned close and whispered almost gently, "Your corpse god is silent," as the life faded from her eyes. She slumped dead at the foot of the very relic she had sworn to protect. Without pause, I approached the reliquary. Up close, the saint's heart was a shriveled thing, blackened and mummified, resting on a silk cushion behind crystal and gold. I studied it, this revered organ that had symbolically sustained Florentia's faith for centuries. What a tiny, fragile thing, I thought, to inspire such fervor. Smiling, I drew a small vial from within my cloak, a concoction of my own blood mixed with profane unguents blessed by our coven's rituals. With one sharp strike from my elbow, I cracked the crystal dome. Slipping my hand through the jagged opening, I poured the viscous purple liquid over the relic. The effect was immediate and delicious. The desiccated heart absorbed the unholy mixture like a sponge. Its surface glistened wetly. For a moment nothing happened, then a pulse ran through the organ. It quivered once, twice, and began to beat again with slow, sodden throbs. I felt rather than heard it, a faint tremor in the air, a distortion rippling through the warp. The taint was spreading through the holy remains, corrupting their spiritual resonance. I wondered what sensations the sleeping faithful across the city might be experiencing at this very moment. Perhaps a sudden flush of heat in the blood, an unsolicited vision of lurid color behind closed eyelids, or a yearning ache in the marrow. "Praise be," Mariel whispered in awe from the doorway, beholding the perverse miracle I had wrought upon her patron saint. I simply laughed under my breath. It was done. The keystone of Florentia's spiritual power was now a conduit for Slaanesh influence. We slipped out as silently as we came, leaving only a dead sister and a quietly throbbing heart behind. The day of the feast broke bright and unbearably hot. A strange haze hung over Sanctum, as if the air itself were drunk on anticipation. From early morning, crowds packed the streets, singing hosannas and waving banners bearing Florentia's rose emblem. The grand procession commenced at noon, a long, winding column of clergy in embroidered robes, flagellants whipping themselves in rhythmic penitence, and artisans carrying huge flower-decked icons of the saint's life. At the procession's end rolled a gilded palanquin bearing the cardinal himself in full regalia, flanked by the governor and his family. Celine rode at her father's side, demure in a white gown. Her face, the picture of beatific innocence. Only I and a few others knew that under that angelic exterior lurked a heart awakened to far darker delights. I watched the parade from amidst the crowd, hooded and anonymous. Around me the people cheered and wept tears of joy at the sight of their holy leaders. I too felt like crying out, but with laughter the trap was primed, and these poor fools were celebrating as they walked straight into it. The culminating mass was held in the Plaza of Martyrs, an immense square before the cathedral that could hold the entire throng. By design, I maneuvered myself and many cult brethren into that space early, securing positions near the front and interspersed throughout the assembly, the better to guide the chaos when it erupted. Towering incense braziers were lit at the four corners of the plaza, filling the air with sweet, heady smoke, and thanks to our meddling, a potent infusion of mind-clouding haze. The reliquary containing the heart was borne out reverently and placed upon the altar for all to see. A collective murmur of amazement rippled through the faithful when someone noticed it was beating softly as if alive. Cries of hallelujah rose. Some fell prostrate in ecstasy, convinced they were witness to a miracle. I saw the cardinal's aides exchange perplexed glances, clearly not briefed on any miracle. But the cardinal himself, poor deluded man, took it in stride as divine validation of the day's sanctity. With a grand gesture, the cardinal silenced the crowd and began his sermon. He was a portly, aging man with a naturally commanding voice, and it boomed across the plaza, extolling the virtues of the emperor and the saint. His words echoed dutifully, but there was a tremor in them, likely from the odd energies swirling about. Under the beating sun and cloying incense, many in the crowd were swaying on their feet, eyes glazed, mouths hanging open in delirium. The cardinal himself mopped his brow repeatedly. His oration grew erratic as something unseen pricked at the edges of his mind. I closed my eyes and reached out with my senses. The warp was so close now, its membrane stretched thin over this gathering. Excess emotion, suppressed for so long, was bubbling to the surface of every soul present. You could taste the repression melting away, turning into unreasoning fervor. The cardinal stumbled in his speech. This wasn't in his script, but he suddenly veered off and began speaking about joy. Yes, joy and celebration in the emperor's love. He extolled the masses to rejoice on this day, to give thanks with not just dutiful prayer, but with their hearts and bodies. A strange exhortation, for imperial sermons usually emphasized sacrifice and solemnity. But the crowd was too intoxicated on our fumes and the spectacle to question it. They cheered wildly, taking his words as gospel. I caught sight of Brother Varn a few yards away, disguised in a deacon's robe. He met my gaze and gave a subtle nod. It was time. As the cardinal raised his arms in a grand benediction, Varn slipped forward and overturned one of the great braziers at the plaza's edge. A wave of narcotic incense billowed forth, thick as a purple storm cloud. At the same moment, one of our other infiltrators, a reformed Arbeitsofficer, ignited a small explosive under a cart filled with sacramental wine near the altar. The blast was minor, more sound than fury, but it shattered casks and sent a spray of consecrated wine, secretly spiked with hallucinogens, into the air in a crimson mist. Pandemonium was instantaneous. Many thought it part of the joyous instruction, a divine frenzy taking hold. They began shouting, dancing, some tearing at their clothes to feel the heat on their skin. The cardinal yelled for order, but his voice was lost in the erupting commotion. And then, oh then, the true climax hit. The corrupted relic pulsed with a sudden, intense vibration. A shockwave of warp energy blasted out from the altar in a ring of visible color, pink and gold and sickly green. It passed through the crowd in a ripple. Where it went, screams followed. I braced myself, laughing exultantly as the wave washed over me. To my senses, it felt like a lover's embrace, an infusion of raw pleasure and and power. All around, its effects manifested in wild and divergent ways. Some people dropped to the ground, convulsing in mindless ecstasy, their bodies racked by blissful seizures. Others were driven instantly mad, launching themselves at neighbors in orgiastic or violent intent. I saw a matronly woman rip the robes from a young cleric and begin devouring his lips with feral hunger. Not 2 paces away, a meek clerk started clawing at his own eyes, shrieking that he beheld the face of the Dark Prince, and it was too beautiful to endure. The plaza descended into a kaleidoscope of lust and brutality. Our cultists fanned the flames, quite literally. Some had come armed with small flamers and began igniting tapestries, wooden stalls, anything that would burn. The air filled with smoke and the sweet salt smell of spilled blood as the mob's revel turned to slaughter. I saw a knot of pilgrims, eyes shining with unnatural rapture, fling themselves forward onto the altar. Reaching as if to embrace the reliquary, they were trampled underfoot by others behind them who laughed even as they crushed flesh and bone. On the periphery, a lone confessor wailed hymnals even as he was pulled into a writhing mass of bodies, disappearing beneath them with a final gurgling prayer. Standing at the heart of this storm, I felt a surge of triumph so pure I could have cried. This was the moment I had dreamed, the sweet fruit of all our careful labor. Florentia's masks were all torn off now, its populace revealed as the depraved, yearning creatures they always were beneath the Emperor's yoke. On the dais, the cardinal was stumbling away from the altar, horror writ plain on his face. He had realized far too late that this was no holy revelry, but a full descent into heresy. To his sides, his attending priests were either writhing on the floor in bliss or savagely attacking each other with ceremonial daggers. Governor Nereus had drawn his dress sword and was trying to shield himself and his daughter from a pair of lunging penitents who were clawing at them with fingernails and teeth. Time to tie off the bow. I drew my own weapon, a slender, wickedly sharp stiletto, and vaulted up the steps of the dais. The cardinal saw me coming first. His eyes widened at my hooded, blood-spattered form. Perhaps in that instant he discerned the truth, that all of this was orchestrated, not spontaneous. He opened his mouth either to cry out or to plead, but I silenced him by slashing the ceremonial stole from his neck and looping it around his throat like a garrote. With a deft twist, I spun his corpulent body around, dragging him backward. He choked, red-faced and sputtering, as the embroidered cloth dug into his windpipe. He clawed feebly at it, staggering against me, which, the very least of what I am, I purred into his ear. With a savage yank, I pulled him off balance and slammed his head against the edge of the altar. I felt rather than heard the crack of bone. The cardinal crumpled, twitching at the foot of the saint's reliquary. At the same moment, a scream of anguish cut through the chaos. A man's scream. I whirled to see Governor Nereus clutching at a dagger buried in his gut. Behind him stood Celine, her white gown flecked with her father's blood, her face a pale mask of shock and grim resolve. The governor turned to gape at his daughter, disbelieving. See, Celine? Her eyes met mine over his shoulder, and in them I saw both the frightened girl and the newly forged woman. She set her jaw. "I am free, father," she said, loud enough that I, and perhaps he alone, heard it clearly amidst the din. Then she yanked the dagger out and stabbed him again, this time in the heart. The governor sagged to his knees, life fading from his eyes, still trying to comprehend his beloved daughter's betrayal. Selene let out a cathartic cry, half sorrow, half euphoria, and kicked him onto his back as he expired. The rose of Florentia had thorns after all. I could have applauded. Instead, I strode to Selene's side and raised her blood-stained hand high, as if presenting a victorious champion. "Behold!" I shouted, my voice ringing out with a clarion power I scarcely knew I possessed. Perhaps the Dark Prince lent me strength to be heard by all. "Behold your pure leaders, broken and bleeding. Behold the truth of your faith, empty and false." A ring of onlookers, cultists, and delirious citizens alike had formed around the dais, drawn to this tableau of the cardinal and governor's demise. Some stared in disbelief, others laughed or cheered, long past sanity. "This world is ours now," I continued, exultant. I tore back my hood at last, revealing my face to the masses. In that moment, I wanted them to know me, to see the face of their ruination and know it was a human one, a woman, not a monster, who had orchestrated all. "I am Theresia the Thirsting, and I bring you the gospel of Slaanesh, the gospel of liberation. Feel now the freedom you were always denied. Feel the joy of casting off your chains." Around the plaza and beyond, screams and hysterical laughter were carrying that message far better than any words. The city was in full collapse. Plumes of smoke rose from multiple districts. I heard the tolling of alarm bells and the distant crack of gunfire. Pockets of remaining loyalists trying hopelessly to quell the anarchy. Selene, flushed with adrenaline, stepped forward to stand with me. Blood trickled down her once pristine dress, but she didn't seem to care. She raised her voice in a wild, impromptu harangue. "I was a prisoner in a cage of gold. Now the door is shattered. People of Florentia, throw off your yoke. There is no shame, no punishment, only the truth of our desires." A ragged cheer answered her, mixed with howls and sobs. As if on cue, the very air answered as well. Thunder without sound rippled overhead. The sky's hue shifted into an unnatural palette of bruised purples and pulsating pinks. The warp had yawned open above us. Reality itself began to unravel under the strain of so much concentrated excess. With an ear-splitting shriek, a host of entities spilled forth from a gaping tear in the sky. Demons. Our guests of honor had arrived. They descended like twisted angels upon the dying city. I saw serpentine shapes coalescing, demonettes of Slaanesh, lithe and androgynous figures with claws gleaming like scythes. They pranced into the panicked crowds, some embracing wailing victims in mock lovers' clutches, only to rend them apart, others throwing back their heads and emitting keening ululations that drove any who listened mad with desire and terror. One by one, the great rose window panes of the cathedral exploded outward as something enormous pushed through from the Imperium, a towering keeper of secrets, a nightmare of beauty and horror. It was Lenaskil, my blessed patron herself, come at last in all her glory to witness our triumph. She laughed, a sound that resonated simultaneously as rapture and agony in the minds of all who heard it. With an elegant swipe of one massive claw, she sheared the cathedral's marble steeple in half, sending chunks of sanctified stone crashing into the throng. I stood in the center of the storm I had summoned, head thrown back, arms outstretched, blood and ash smeared across my cheeks like war paint. Around me, demon and mortal danced the final dance of Florentia, an orgy of slaughter and ecstasy under a sky that tore itself open in glorious profanity. Selene remained at my side, trembling but unflinching as a lesser demonette curled around her like a cat, nuzzling at the gore on her dress. I placed a protective hand on the girl's shoulder. She had earned her place in this new world. I would not let her come to harm if I could help it. The planet was lost. Even had the Imperium responded at that very instant with troops or orbital strikes, it would have been futile. The warp rift yawned wide, isolating the world from any hope of reinforcement. And truthfully, by the time that rift closed, if it ever would, nothing recognizable as Imperial would remain here. As dawn broke over a smoke-choked horizon, I found myself once again in the cathedral's plaza, now carpeted in debris and viscera. Broken icons and shredded scrolls of scripture fluttered in the hot wind like carrion birds. In the ruins of the altar lay the reliquary, shattered completely, the saint's heart gone, devoured by some creature of the warp, no doubt. How symbolic, I mused. The heart of Florentia literally consumed. Selene leaned on me, exhausted but alive, her eyes distant as she processed all she had witnessed. Brother Varn limped over, bloodied but grinning like a man possessed, which, in a sense, he nearly was. Other cult survivors gathered, exchanging delirious embraces and praises to Slaanesh. We had done it. The high of victory coursed through me, headier than any drug. I guided them all in one last act before we quit that place, a profane ritual of thanksgiving there on the very steps where the cardinal had preached obedience. We raised our voices in a bawdy, exultant anthem to the Dark Prince. Part prayer, part triumphal scream, it echoed through the hollowed shells of sanctity and out into the ash-laden air. Slaanesh had answered our call indeed, and we answered in kind with our devotion. Only when the first tremors of reality's recoil began, signs that the Inquisition might be attempting some distant sanction, did I give the order to disperse. Those of us who had the means to leave the planet would do so, carrying our gospel further. Those who remained were either unwilling to depart their new paradise of excess or too far gone to care. As I write these recollections, we are already underway aboard a hidden vessel, one of the governor's own pleasure yachts, conveniently repurposed for our escape. Through the viewport, the planet recedes as a hazy marble veined with angry red fires. I wonder if the Imperium will even bother trying to reconquer it. Perhaps they will simply declare exterminatus and scour the entire globe of life. It changes little to me. Florentia's soul already belongs to Slaanesh. Whether its surface ends in ash or festers on as a demon world, the Imperium has lost its prize forever. I think of that final moment in the plaza beneath the swirling sky when I stood drenched in the blood of priests and princes and felt truly, unequivocally alive. That feeling of purpose fulfilled and freedom won anew, I hold it close, like like a cherished lover as we slip into the Imperium en route to our next destination. I remain what I chose to become. I am the hand that turns the key in humanity's chains, the whisper that shatters sanctity, the gentle push, and the sharp knife in the dark. I am Theresia the Thirsting, bride of Slaanesh, and wherever the silent tyranny of the Imperium reigns, I will go forth to offer the gift of its undoing. Temptation is the path to damnation, they say. They were right. I tempted Florentia, every single soul, and led them straight into damnation's eager embrace. But here is the secret the Imperium will never grasp. In that damnation, they tasted freedom. However brief or terrifying, they lived and died as something more than cogs in the great machine. In the end, they were free. Damnation has its price, yes, but as Florentia learned in its final orgy of truth, oh, how sweet the price can be.